Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Terrence Moore and Jim Miller. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. Gentlemen, it's good to be back with you again from another hiatus that we've had. But tonight we're going to talk about some local topics, so let's jump right in. The first article that we're going to talk about is Washington County Treasurer is an elected position. The commissioners want to change that. Giving a little bit of background on that, it's been an elected position for quite some time. We've only had 3 treasurers over the years. Todd Hershey recently retired after 36 years. Matt Breeding, friend of the show, was elected to that position. But the county commissioners have had conversations where, at least as the article stated, a few county commissioners were quoted. They wanted to fill that with better financial management, someone with the prerequisite skill sets for the challenges that we face in today's world. Jim, I'll start with you. What say you?
Well, could part of this be that they seem to have trouble keeping a chief financial officer? I mean, seriously. Number one, I think it's a great idea. I think we should do this. We're one of only 4 counties, as I understand it, in the state of Maryland
That don't.
And I would suspect if you looked at other states, you're going to find similar results. But let us not forget that we have, in all seriousness, and with no disrespect to the commissioners or anybody else at county staff, we've had trouble keeping a CFO.
Right. So by making this another hireable position with all the turnover that we continue to see, do you see that as a concern of yours?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, obviously the job market has a lot to do with that. There were some other issues that may have had to do with some of the recent turnovers. But the fact of the matter is, going back to the core competencies that this position required, we are a far different county today than we were even 5 years ago. And I'm sure, just like every other business entity, and at its core, the county is a business, right? It has to operate similar to a business. There's a lot more stuff that this position has to probably do. Right.
You know, also in the article, our current treasurer, Matt Breeden, he said, you know, he was fine with this.
He supported it.
He's not planning to run for re-election. But then he also said, but I might apply for the job. So I don't know what that means. Yeah. But Terrence, when it comes to cons would be you're taking away public input. One of the things that the former treasurer Hershey said is that being that he was having to go up for a re-election every 4 years, he was motivated to do his best for the taxpayers. So you have a little loss of motivation. And then probably the weakest one of all is tradition. How do you feel about that?
Well, there's no motivation greater than being terminated, because you don't have to wait 4 years for that, right? So I can't see it about motivation. I think that's more of his work ethic that he was speaking towards. Also with it, as far as the public having input, I want the best people and the most qualified people managing money being my treasurer, right? You don't need my input. Put the most qualified person in that job, right? Not the most passionate about that job. I may not know and not be able to elect that person. Right. So I would like to see an interview process. We've seen during a number of elections right now in campaigning that no one's really talking about their qualifications anymore. It's really either pandering to their party or it's a social media attention grab, right? Right. So I like a hiring process. It may be the human resource person in me, right? I like somebody to do their due diligence and keep the person most qualified in the job. And I like that this article also pointed out to the sitting treasurer who says, I'm all good with the change in the process, right? So it's not about the qualification or the job that the individual is doing. It's really about the process and putting the best people in the job, not the most popular.
Right.
Well, let's face it, 2 heads are better than 1. And if you've got a chief financial officer that has the bona fides to do the job, and if you have the treasurer that has the bona fides, how much trouble are they going to keep us out of, or how much, how much, and by trouble I mean increased interest rates, you name it. It could be any number of things
Right.
that they could help us avoid.
And they're not working independently. We have elected body in place with our county commissioners that should be governing this and making sure the checks and balances are in place. They should be doing their due diligence to ensure that they have the right resources to make the right decisions, as well as taking the right steps after decisions are made to ensure that the constituents aren't impacted. So some of these jobs that are elected positions, and we've seen some during the last election as well, we were kind of wondering, how do you qualify yourself for that other than putting your name in the Board of Elections and paying your fee, right? I think there's a lot of elected positions. We should be increasing the standard of qualifications on.
Well, and can we agree that there's a high degree of likelihood that when people go and vote,
They don't know.
the small percentage of the population that does, but that's another subject for another day. But the treasurer is probably, if you're going to research positions, that's probably going to be at the bottom of your list. It certainly is mine.
Right.
And I think there's also a lot of people who vote assume that some kind of due diligence was already put in place, that just anybody couldn't be applying for certain jobs.
But they can.
But they can.
Right.
And I don't think the constituents really,
Right.
as we don't know that. But when someone's being hired for a position, you have a human resource department. You have to submit your resumes. You have to go through an interview process. You have to go through background checks, which is odd, right? It's easier to get an elected position than it is to get
A job.
A job. So, and I'm not saying anything about it's just the process.
Right.
It's not about the people. It's about the process, and we have to reevaluate. And I'm all for taking a step back and looking for this process. And if the sitting treasurer wants to apply, he should be allowed to do so.
Well, we've seen how the political process can come in and disrupt the apple cart, right? This last election cycle, Jason Malott, he lost the registered wills race. You cannot find one person that did not say that he did a great job in his role. But we're in a conservative county, and it was kind of a red movement, right? And he was voted out, and I'm sure the lady that won will do a great job, but I don't know anything about her qualifications compared to his.
Right.
And if they were both in an interview for that position, would it look very much differently
Absolutely.
than it would have been in an open election?
Yeah, I think it
Absolutely.
would, for sure.
And again, when we went through election season, it was about 4 or 5 positions that were on the ballot that we really couldn't speak to what they actually did.
Right.
Right.
And this is one of them.
Right. This is one of them, right? So just to understand the role. So yeah,
In fact, I don't
think
know
it's
what the role
misplaced.
is right now.
Right.
If you ask me, what does breeding do all day?
And what's the relationship between the treasurer and the CFO?
Right.
And what is that interaction like? And how do they work together? And one's elected and one's not. It's
And let me
really
answer
tough
this:
thing.
when you have seen financial discussions at county commissioner meetings,
You never see the treasurer.
you see the CFO.
Well, I can speak to the point of a treasurer job is usually more tactical, and a CFO is more strategic. So I think you should be seeing the treasurer doing the tactical, the input of information. That's why they're looking for somebody like an accountant, somebody who has that kind of background and that skill set.
Yeah.
Because you're more hands-on, you're crunching numbers in and out. I think the CFO kind of looks at the outputs of those numbers and makes strategic decisions
And the
of where the
projections.
dollar's going and make the forecasted projections,
Yeah.
and then advises the county commissioners. But that frontline job affects every job thereafter, right? You misplace a decimal or you move a zero somewhere, you're making poor decisions, right? So
Right.
it's equally important because it's a tactical job, and that's why I believe it should be something that definitely should be hired into.
Well, it
rather
looks
than-
like this is an issue that's going to go to Annapolis, but with 20 out of 24 jurisdictions that are doing it, and this article didn't speak to any dissent, although there was only 2, I believe it was only 2 of the county commissioners that were quoted in the article.
Right.
I don't see this as a contentious issue, and if that's been the practice around the state for the majority, I think this is something that just kind of,
Yeah. Well,
gets
and if
taken
we
care
would
of.
have gone with charter home rule, this may have happened way back when.
Yep.
Right.
And
Which-
that's still up for debate, right?
Well, how many other counties don't have charter home rule? I think there's 2 or 3
We're a total of 4, including out. It's 4.
that don't have charter home rule.
Yep.
Okay, I thought it was less than that, but okay.
Yep. I think we're 4 in total.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes sense. One has to wonder how that org chart will look.
Yes.
I know this is kind of, it's, reading this, I appreciate how this was handled, right? Let's say that. I know that, just kind of, if you get a chance, viewers to read the article, they went to him first. They spoke to the sitting treasurer. They asked him his input, asked him if he was going to be reelected before just making arbitrary decisions and causing more dysfunction and dissension in the building. It was handled in what I see as a professional manner, right? So I want to give credit to that because that's not always the case, what we've seen in some of our elected bodies and elected officials at every level. So I do appreciate how this was handled, and know that the person managing our money is not sitting there disgruntled, right? So I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think, again, you don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I'll applaud both Jeff and John for the way they approached this, Jeff Klein and John Barr.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Interesting.
So that'll be something that we'll follow in Annapolis, but I would imagine if you have full support of the county commissioners and your delegation, I think this just moves through and we move ahead. I don't see anything that's on the con side that's compelling enough not to do it.
The con is who gets hired, right? That has to be handled just as strategically, right? It's going to turn eyes and attention to that, whoever's going to be hired into that position first, right? You take on a different burden being the first or being the change that happens that there may be a fraction of people that don't agree with, right?
Right.
So you can't make a misstep that's not going to be magnified across,
But even
the media and other things.
even if it makes it through the legislature this year, you still then have 2 more years.
Right, but
until you would have to hire for that position, because Breeden is just in his first year now. By the time the legislative session is over, it is enacted, then you have 2 years until you get to that point.
So
person's still
is
the
the
first.
elected, this is going to be a dumb question, but is the elected position of treasurer a full-time position? Does Matt Breeden work 8 to 5?
I don't know, but I know there's a salary involved.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's considered full-time or not, but I believe there's a salary somewhere in the $60,000 to $80,000 range, if I remember correctly.
And is that salary going to transfer over? Because right now there's the shortage of accountants out there as well.
Yeah.
So is this going to be an increase?
Well,
in
and the
I'm
other
sure it
thing
is.
will you have to pay more
That's what I'm saying.
for
An
that
increase.
position?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Time
But
will tell.
Time will tell, but again, if taxpayers are going to pay more for something, who is managing your money is one of those areas that
I agree.
you do. However, there's some issues in that building in regards to who's hired that have to sort themselves out. However, and here's the other interesting thing. It would actually probably be new county commissioners
Absolutely.
that will be making the decision,
Possibly.
because their terms will be up also
Correct.
as well. So voters will have a lot to think about.
Well, they could make the decision. The current board could make the decision and make it effective with the new board, right?
Who are you going to hire and have them sitting in the wings for 2 years, though?
Well, I'm not saying you make it. You don't have to hire someone and have them sitting in the wings for 2 years. You make the decision, you pass the ordinance, you get it approved at Annapolis, and then you go into hiring mode 8 or 9 months before the election.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then you hire somebody in October.
Commissioners
And they sit out
are
the
not
year.
up this term. They're not up in 2024.
No, but breeding is not up until
2026,
2026.
which is when the commissioners are up.
Right.
All the same time.
So, you're just talking about if they start the process while this county commissioner group is still seated.
Yeah,
Correct.
Start, like as Jim said, 6 months, start in June, start doing hiring, put the rec out there, start doing the interviewing. By the time you put somebody in seat and make a decision around, October, November, they still sit, even if they get ousted, they still sit to the end of the year.
True.
So.
True.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen, I'm looking at the other topics. We got some cool stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about some Congressional District 6, the 2024 election. That field is starting to shape up. There was another announcement today. And then we'll talk a little bit about Hagerstown and the indoor turf arena and some of the issues and challenges around that. But let's take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll have more of the flip side after the break. Welcome back to the show. Gentlemen, it's almost like we're in never-ending election season.
Well, we're not. We are in never-ending election season.
So here in the state of Maryland, we have a Senate race with the pending retirement of Senator Ben Cardin. All the energies on the Democratic side from that standpoint. I don't really believe that there's any Republicans of note at this point that'll make a dent in the race. That race looks to be likely Democrat by any of the credible polling services. But we have had some movement in that race. Will Jawando, a Democrat from Montgomery County, was in the race. I believe he had worked in the Obama administration. He recently stepped out of the race and himself, along with Governor Wes Moore, have endorsed Angela also Brooks.
Yep.
So now we have basically a Democratic race between our Congressman David Trone and Prince George's County Executive Angela also Brooks. Jim, what say you?
I think that's going to be the race. And I think the Republicans, frankly, are going to be also ran. On the Republican side, you have Robin Ficker, who's been around for a long time.
He's more of a caricature at this point.
He is. He absolutely is. You have Lori Friend, okay. You have Christopher Puleo and John Tykert, none of which I know much about. Two of them on the Ballotpedia site don't even have pictures up. So, I'm not sure that they're that serious about it. On the Democratic side, again, Angela versus David. You've got William Jawando, you've got Brian Frydenborg. You have Juan Dominguez, which is a new,
race, right.
he's a new comer to the race.
Telecom executive.
You have Stephen Suferer, again, no picture. Marcellus Cruz, no picture. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you're not going to take the time to post your picture, are you really that serious about it?
Right.
I want to see these guys, I want to see their financial records to see how much money they've raised.
Well, we just ended the third quarter recently, and those filings are out for the third quarter. Trone has put about $10 million of his own money in. He's committed to putting up to $40 million in. Also, Brooks has raised about $3 million in the race, but she received something that is more valuable than Trone's money. When you get the endorsement of the governor and another competitor and the amount of free media that she gets from that, that really does give her a boost. Well, it'll be interesting to see how much that counteracts the money that Trone's going to put in the race. But Terrence, how do you see it?
I agree 100%. I think the governor's endorsement was a wow moment. I personally thought he would hold it close to his vest until got closer to the primaries. Couple of hypotheses of why he did it, but he had started out saying he just wanted a clean race. There was a part of me thought that he would kind of just step back and stay out of it.
Yeah.
But immediately after Jawando pulls out of the race,
it was coordinated, right?
He comes right back and gives his endorsement. So, I thought early on he didn't want to really give his endorsement between Trone and Alsobrook, but I think it was really he didn't want to give his endorsement between Jawando and Alsobrook. And him stepping out may have given him leeway to do so. And you look at the list of people that they have endorsing them on their page. If you're not in the political circles, you have no idea who these people are.
Right.
But when you have someone with the notoriety like the governor, it is swaying, and it also will pull and draft a lot of people onto her campaign to feel more comfortable endorsing her as well. So I thought that was a huge endorsement. I still think it was real early.
Yes.
But you know what's coming up in a couple of months? Legislative session. So I think there's some horse trading there as well of going into legislative session and possibly having some support with the budget, especially now with the new law that the legislators have more influence on the budget than they have before.
So let me read between the lines of what you just said. The majority of the legislative Black caucus is supporting Alsobrooks at this point. Are you suggesting that for the governor to get his agenda through, he was getting in line with the caucus?
I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying that's one way you can look at it. I have no proof or evidence. You know, everything with me is just a suggestive thought. Maybe, but it does play out with the new law in place that has the legislative session having more control over the, especially with more Democrats in position right now, as well as the commanding vote. So it would just make sense.
Right.
If you want to go in and you really want to push a budget that's going to be a shoestring budget this year as well, and you have some big agenda items like your service program that you have in there, and you need these things funded, and you want to keep pushing forward with all these big ticket items you said in your first year, it'd be a good way to get some votes on your side.
True. Jim, let me throw this factoid at you. In Trone's run for Senate, he has 49 members of Congress endorsing him. None of them are from the state of Maryland.
There you go.
What say you?
Well, I mean, he's a national figure. As a business figure, as a congressional figure, he's a national figure. So that makes sense, I guess.
But that doesn't help him in his race, being a
No,
national
it doesn't.
figure.
It doesn't. But endorsements, who pays attention to endorsements anyway? Really? I mean, seriously, what do they mean? Do they move the needle? I haven't seen any statistics that suggest that.
Well, you have a point there because our former President Trone doesn't have a good track record with his endorsements of political candidates.
Well, look at our governor as governor because he was endorsed by people by the name of Oprah Winfrey and some of these major people who may endorse him as well. In this campaigning or this election phase that we're in, endorsements by the right people who have the popularity, who have the Twitter feeds and the social media, who people like, they like you because they like them. So politically, some of the endorsements, no. But when you have some people with high level of popularity, endorsements do matter, unfortunately.
And in conversations with politicos in Prince George's County, it was reminded to me that Alsobrooks endorsed Moore's campaign from governor at a time where he was kind of middle of the pack and wasn't looking to be the likely nominee. But she stepped up and endorsed and helped kind of move the needle for him there. So obviously he was showing some love to her right back.
And you know what? And that's great. And I'm going to hope that is the end of the quid pro quo. It's not about getting money in the budget. I don't think Governor Hogan would have done that. I frankly don't think Governor Westmore, and I'm the Republican in the room saying that, by the way. So let's get that opinion out there. I don't think it is quid pro quo at that level. I could be wrong, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume positive intent. Let's talk about another thing. Let's talk about campaign. Let's talk about finance. So Robin Ficker is the leading Republican money getter at this point with a bank receipts of $209,602.
That's not going to do it.
The lowest fundraising Democrat is Juan Dominguez.
He just got in the race in September, though.
And he has $248,135. In fact, if you take the fundraising of all the Republican candidates, they don't equal what the lowest fundraising Democrat has.
Well, that shows you where the energy is, right?
Well,
And
that's
just-
exactly right.
It shows you just the demographics of
Maryland.
the electorate there.
It's still early as well. It
is still
it's
early.
Still, like, no, a lot of people hold on their money. One, this is probably the best time, as we talked about before, to get donor funds at the end of the year. For some people in a tax purpose, they like to give more during this season. But you also know that you really want to give to the people that you think. I'm not giving my money to anybody who I don't think has a chance to win. So I need to kind of feel out, one, who's in the pack, right? Who's actually running, and who has a chance to win. I want my money to put you over the top. I don't want to put my money into a pit that's not going to go anywhere.
I don't believe the Republican side in this race is going to see any energy at all.
They're
and
not.
And if Robin Thicke is the leading the Republican Party in regards to investment, that tells you that there's no smart money going to be wasted in that race.
No, I agree with that as far as Democrats. Yes, this is a Democratic race. It is. I'm just saying, as we start looking at donor dollars, I think we have to take them with a grain of salt right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're still really early.
Yes, we are really early. And I think, we're hearing even in other races how some big money is starting to enter into these races
Yes.
and is going to dwarf some of these
Yes.
dollars even more in some other ways. And just kind of clear up the quid pro quo in politics. That's just politics. I was saying nothing was wrong with it. I just believe it happens, and I believe every sitting person has done it in some way or another. So I'm not calling out Governor Moore specifically to it, but I'm just saying
Right.
endorsements are currency, and quid pro quo is how you get things done in an elected seat. And let me say this as well. I hope this election stays clean, right? I've known even when, Congressman Trone had some stuff with when he went against Neil Parrott in his prior seat, and I know there was some mailings and some stuff that got out there that wasn't really about politics or about it just didn't look good
It doesn't.
watching our
You're
elected
right.
officials say
Well,
some
that was the interesting thing, because when the seat came open in the winter, right, one of the things that Governor Moore said, he wanted a clean race, and that was what made me think that he was going to sit this out on the sidelines and he wasn't going to come out early.
But how does him coming out early make it not a clean race? If he has a preference, why wouldn't he state that preference?
Because it's kind of hard for you to, as the leader of the party, kind of say, okay, guys, we're not going to run this type of race when you've already picked your pony.
Okay. Well, maybe he's the pony that he thinks can win the race. And at the end of the day, it's about winning, right? So Ben Cardin ran in 2018 against Tony Campbell,
Yep.
who got 30.3% of the vote. Still not horrible. What happened to Mr. Campbell?
I'm sure his donors said,
We're done?
yeah. I mean, if you run for that seat and you're losing by what, 60
Double
points?
digits.
Yeah. It's like,
Well, you're 50%. You're less than 50%
Yeah.
of what the winning person got.
Let's say Congressman Trone loses this. You think he gets back into any other seat again?
Yeah.
If he loses by 30 points.
Yeah, I don't think he'll lose by 30 points.
No.
I'm not saying he'll win, but I'm not sure he's good. I don't think he'll lose by 30
I know
points.
it's early in the election season, but are we going to start putting numbers out there, or are you guys too early to get on the record
Too early for
with
numbers. Too early for numbers. I still think there's going to be some
Hold
people
on,
that
hold
pop
on.
in.
Jim has a little gleam in his eye.
Okay.
he wants a
Go
little
ahead.
retribution for the
Go
last
ahead.
cycle.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
no.
Maverick.
Jim, did you want to?
I can't afford any more expensive dinners for losing on elections, so
So you'll hold off on that?
I'm holding off. Yes,
All right, very good.
I will tell you, I would bet if I had $100 to bet, I'd bet $100 that it's going to be a Democrat.
Oh,
Oh, Jim.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'll go out on that limb for you
Out
people.
on that limb.
All right.
I'm just hearing from my friends around the state. I mean, Trone is flooding the airways with his ads,
Yep.
and to the point that they are obnoxious. And I've heard from African Americans in Baltimore and PG County, and they feel like it's pandering. Because there's criminal justice reform and some of the issues that he's talking
Prison
about.
reform, yeah.
Prison reform.
Well, Yeah, and I agree. But I don't think he is, honestly. I think he's done a pretty good job as a congressman. Just my opinion.
Depends on which circles you're in. Depends on your view from the cheap seats.
Let's get to the fun one, 6th District Congress.
Oh, 6th District Congress, yes. So that's a crowded field. There's about 15 candidates that have filed with the Federal Elections Commission for that. 8 Democrats, 6 Republicans, and today there was an announcement from another prominent Democrat, April McClain Delaney, who should be a familiar name to our guests because her husband, John Delaney, held that seat before he ran for president. She jumps in the race as of today. This has kind of been telegraphed because she gave up her job just a month or so ago and was kind of clearing the deck for that. She comes into the race with no money at this point, but that's mainly because of the Hatch Act and her employment, so she hasn't been able to kick off her fundraising. But it looks like as of today, if you were on your Twitter machine, you will see that she's kicked off her fundraising. She's opened up her Act Blue accounts and she is at it. Jim, what say you about this race?
Well, so let's look at the people. George Gluck, there's a name that we've heard.
He's kind of like the he's like the Democratic Robin Ficker.
Yes. So George Gluck is, but you know what? He gets his message out.
Yeah.
That's why he comes
why
to
he does
every debate. He has a message that he wants to send out, and by golly, he gets it out.
his message out.
And I appreciate that. Don't just hide in the back and throw your name on the list. If you're going to come up, at least be heard.
Well, that's exactly right. Several women in the race, including Leslie Lopez, Lori Ann Sales, and Destiny West, as well as our current mayor, Takesha Martinez. I don't know anything I know a little bit about Takesha, not so much. I frankly, with all due respect, I don't think she's got a snowball's chance. Just my opinion. Let me rephrase that. She has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do, and not much time to do it.
Of the candidates that are in the race, there's a Stephen Dowd that's in the race. There's quite a few Frederick County-ish, Montgomery County folks in the race. You have Joe Vogel, who's a delegate in Montgomery County.
Right.
The top overall fundraiser, Destiny West. She hasn't raised a lot of money, but she's campaigning smart because when you look at the Democratic electorate in the primary, it's dominated with Frederick County. And she spent a significant amount of time in Frederick County building relationships. And I've seen her in Washington County as of recent. Lori Sales, there hasn't really been much there. And again, the point that Terrence made, the fundraising side really has not kicked off in these races. And to be honest, with politicals around the state I've talked to, they were really disappointed in the candidate pool really until like April Delaney jumped in the race. Because there's several folks running in this race that just got elected or just were put in position, and it felt more like opportunism, like you haven't proved yourself in your current role to kind of get an upgrade. So there were some folks feeling that about some of the candidates. I know that some of the ones in Montgomery County were just elected. And our mayor here was just appointed earlier in the year. So there were some grumblings about, that type of activity. But the other side of the coin is these seats don't come open very often.
No, they don't.
So that's what brings so many folks out of the woodworks. And the other thing that I'm reading here is that there were 5 other candidates that have filed with the Maryland State Election Board to be on the primary ballot. So it's crowded, and there's still other prominent Democrats and Republicans that are watching to see if they're going to jump in the race. The one thing that I'll say, T, and I'll get your opinion on this, the one thing I'll say about with Delaney getting in the race and her husband are multimillionaires, what you've done is you've raised the price tag of what you're going to need to be able to compete in a Montgomery County, what you're going to need to compete in a Frederick to get your message out. What say you?
You also raised the name recognition.
Yes.
Right? Delaney wasn't run out of town. right?
He was beloved.
He was beloved and aspiring for something greater, right? So he went into a presidential race with, I'm sure, a pretty, and walked away with, because I think he didn't go to the primaries. I don't believe. I think he dropped out of the race sometime.
He was early, right?
Right, pretty early. So he has a pretty nice war chest. I'm sure that that's still sitting there as well. But I think this is a name recognition and someone who could speak to the qualifications, who's been close to the seat, and not saying that she has to run on her husband's name, because her resume is strong enough by itself, if not more. So, and I'm not saying is that, but as someone who has been close to politics, I think she comes in and raises the bar of recognition. When you look down a lot of these lists and you go, I don't know any of these people, you do hear a name like Delaney that resonates with you and kind of gives your attention, especially to some of those voters who come to the polls who may not know any of the people's names. They may echo with the name that they remember somewhat. So I think that raises the bar there. She's also run this race, as well, side by side, for a number of years as well. So she knows where to go. She knows where to find the money. She knows, the communities, and she knows the events to attend. So she's coming in with a playbook that most of these candidates right now have no access to whatsoever in the most case, unless they're buying it from some consultants.
And her name is just going to bring her goodwill.
That's true.
Right.
That's going to bring her goodwill. Now, on the Republican side, it looks like we have roughly about 5 or 6 candidates. We have Heath Barnes, who's the mayor of Woodsboro. We have Chris Heiser. Neil Parrott has not announced he was running. I believe the last thing I've seen is that he's kind of still exploring his options, but had opened his account with the FEC for fundraising purposes, but he wasn't going to probably make an announcement till November. You have, is it
Mariella
Roca?
Yep.
Tom Royals, and our former delegate, Dr. Brenda Cham. Tom Royals is, I believe, leading the Republican side in regards to fundraising, in regards to funds that have come in so far. I think before Delaney got in the race, I've heard some prominent Republicans were on the sidelines kind of eyeing this race because that seat was vulnerable. And with the list of Democrats that were on the board, it was for the taking. It was going to take someone like April Delaney to probably slow that. And some of those on the Republican side could still come in. I heard Kelly Schultz was on the sidelines.
Yes.
Looking at this race. I heard Buckley from Allegheny County was one that was eyeing this race. And there was a few other higher profile Republicans that have government service under their belt that were kind of watching this race to see.
Well, and the congressional map is better for the Republicans today than it was in recent years.
Well, Neil Parrott showed us that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He went from losing from close to 30 points to 10 points?
Right.
Right.
And, the reality is there's still, the president of our country has a very low approval rating right now. Congress has a very low approval rating right now. This could be the red wave.
I don't see that moving the needle in this race unless the electorate goes crazy and picks the wrong candidate in this race.
So let me just say, you mentioned about Tom Royals being high in the fundraising. You're right, he's third.
Oh, he's only third?
Yes. Guess who's fourth? Keisha Martinez.
Oh, but you're talking full.
Yes. Yeah, he is the number one in Republican.
Yes.
But in the total race, he's number 3 and number 4.
Yes.
That's not bad. Keisha, according to this report, Keisha raised $151,070.
Yeah. That's a strong start for her without name recognition. But she's paying for those dollars. She hired a consulting firm. She's using Act Blue. And the majority of those donations are not from her district. But it does give her a war chest to get started, right? You have to build up something so that you can go to the events that you need to be in. You need to have this type of funding to get your message out there for some media. The only question is, will it sustain? Because now when you have April Delaney, she sets up her Act Blue account today.
Right.
So now you have competition for those dollars with someone that's more high profile.
And what they estimated this race would cost up to $5 million possible to win the race.
Yeah, 3 to 5.
Right? The bills haven't started coming in yet either, right? So I think you called out a lot of big prominent names that are going to come in with big donors behind them right away. A lot of these donors have been boots on the ground. They've been hard hitting to get these dollars. But when someone comes in and writes a check for $200,000 right away, it kind of puts a damper on a lot of that.
Yeah.
Also, when you start spending on real campaign ads and funds and going to these events and throwing dinner parties and putting up big investment so you can bring back dollars, that's what those you may spend $50,000 to have a dinner party to hopefully come out with another $500,000.
Right.
So, but you have to have that upfront money investment to get those dollars as well. So I think it's still early from the financials right now, because I think a lot of those big names are going to come in and they're going to absorb a lot of the dollars that are out there right now that people are giving to maybe some of these other candidates.
That's true, because the folks that will come in from this point forward, so the filing deadline is February 9th, right? Mm-hmm. You would imagine that most folks that are going to come in are going to come in before year end so they can take advantage of, the big donors and the tax write-offs that they can get from their donations. But if someone's going to come into the race now, they're coming with money.
Absolutely.
Right? They're coming with people that can write big checks.
But let me also say this, and then we've got to take a break because we're way over. But if you think about, we said earlier about the never-ending election cycle.
Yes.
Right? Congressional terms are 2 years, right?
Yes.
You take, let's say we split it in the middle with 3 to 5 million. Let's say it costs $4 million to win this race. On day one,
you have to start raising money.
You have to start raising $5,500 a day, every day, including Christmas, New Year's.
Wow.
No days off.
No days off. Yeah. $5,500 a day.
That's good data. That puts it in perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to really do your job when you're a perpetual fundraiser, though, right?
That's all I got to say about shrimp.
All right, well, let's take a break. Stay with us. We'll be back to talk more about the indoor turf arena and the city of Hagerstown after the break. Welcome back to the show. Gentlemen, the city of Hagerstown has settled on a contractor from Waynesboro for the Hagerstown Fieldhouse that they're building with a price tag of $26 million. Jim, what say you?
84 seconds.
84 seconds.
Yes. That's how much time it took them from the time that this legislation or this was introduced at City Council to vote yay. There was no discussion. There was no questions. There was nobody appearing from the audience. I am shocked, based on 40 years of people blowing up about a multi-use or a baseball stadium, whatever you want to call it, that nobody in this community said anything. And oh, by the way, the baseball stadium, the multi-use facility, is being funded by the state
lottery money.
Lottery money and the stadium authority. And as I understand it, 17 million is still unfunded that is going to, at this point, not to say this won't change, but at this point is going to fall to the taxpayers.
Yes. I believe they're looking to go to the Maryland legislature again
at
year.
This point. We don't know what that, but they're signing a contract today, so at this point, the taxpayers are on the hook. Blows my mind. I'm not saying it's a bad project. Actually, I think it's a good project. I'm a little worried about certain things like access to it. Is the lower middle class people, are they going to have access? Yep. What is the goal here? That's what I need to hear more about. And again, I'm not poo-pooing the project. I think it's a great project.
I'm going to benefit from the project. I live in the county. I don't have to pay for it. My son's godfather has disposable income. Okay, so even though I don't, My son's going to be able to enjoy this amenity, and it's pretty cool. I don't know if my daughter will. I don't know where her volleyball career will be, where she's by the time this is finished. But I'm going to enjoy this project. I have the same concerns with you in regards to access and equity and all those other things that we talk about. But Terrence, you're the city taxpayer in the room. You're going to be on the hook for $17 million at least as a taxpayer. How do you feel?
I have a couple of questions that haven't been answered. And I don't feel included in the decision being made either, that this is in best interest, especially right now considering the other needs that I'd rather my tax dollars be going to in this community. I also have a problem with a exiting administration making such a decision that can possibly put debt onto the city at $17 million at some of the highest rates possible right now that we've seen.
In 40 years.
Yeah, right. And be exiting when they couldn't even stomach to consider raising taxes earlier last year. So are they going to raise taxes now? Right? They said they left it open. So are they going to raise taxes and then leave? I'm a little concerned about where this is going. And it could be just gaps in communication of it kind of explaining
We
this.
need to know more. I think that's a fair. I think that's a fair statement.
My concern is if you watch city council meetings, there is not a lot of robust discussion. I have not heard any robust discussion about the debt service. What are the risks in regards to inflation, that the 17 million number deficit is not the actual number?
Here's a couple other things that, again, contractor selected. I have nothing against this contractor. I don't know this contractor.
He's got a history.
He has a great history.
Good history.
Good
in this
history.
county.
But I've rarely seen contractors in a bid come in over $500,000 cheaper than competition. That was a little, that raised a little red flag for me. Not against the contractor, but what are the expectations of this? And we all know projects start to balloon in budget as you get involved with them. So again, I don't know what that is. I just would like to know, instead of celebrating how much. Now I say cheaper because I think that's about quality. How much, how
Less
the cost
expensive.
was so much less. But $500,000 is substantial from a contractor standpoint. Another thing is the cost doesn't stop with the construction of the building, right? There's a lot of additional costs that come with that. Where is that money coming from when you're struggling even raising the beams? That's another issue I have, right? Your funding sources that you called out. You said state grants, American Rescue Plan Act funds, city budget transfers, donations, hotel revenue, totaling possibly $9 million. None of those are guaranteed funds, right? So you're saying you can do it, but there's no guarantee that those $9 million are going to come in there. We already talked about bond financing and why this is probably not the best time to be doing bond financing at such a substantial amount of money when you have other priorities. Time scope, we're going to be in there by 2024. What are you putting up?
2025.
No, it's 2024.
Oh, it's like fourth quarter 2024.
Right. They can open in 2024. What are you actually putting up in 2024? Which makes me concerned because I know that your projects has to be implemented in effect for the last bit of the American Rescue Plan Act money. So I can see why the aggressiveness of the date is there, but will you be able to make it? And if you don't make it, are we on the hook back to the state, to the government, federal government? That's another one. Community benefit against financial responsibility. There's a lot of things right now we need. Like there's a huge stadium going up downtown. We don't even know if those benefits are going to return what we expect on them right now. And that's not costing us anything.
Right.
There's so many other greater needs. We have housing issues right now, right? I know the kids need something to do. I'm all for it. Let's invest in our schools. Let's invest in the programs that are out there already. And let's build some homes so we can bring in a new generation into this community. Why aren't we using that money for something that is more about our infrastructure around our homes? Housing issue. And then it's transparency all over again and accountability. You've been fighting for this for the last 2 or 3 years. I give it to you, right? But you're about to hand the reins off. Right? A lot of this administration may not be here next year.
Most of them aren't running.
Or
you have a mayor that won't be the mayor, right? You're going to have
Maybe.
a new mayor.
right?
We don't know that.
Are you breaking news?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying. I think it's early to say that most of them aren't going to be there. We've heard rumors, but I haven't heard anybody say.
Well, Mayor Martinez is running for Congress,
I
so
understand
unless she reverses course,
but there
she
still
won't
is
be
a
there.
path.
Former mayor and former councilman Brucci is already gone.
Right. That doesn't say that he doesn't run for mayor.
Listen, he's right.
True.
You're
I
saying
give you
there's a
that.
chance.
But
right.
you have a lot of questions. But Terrence, can I suggest to you, there's really only one question you should be asking. Where do you send your check?
Yeah.
Well, I ain't got to ask that question because it's attached to my
I think-
tax bill every year.
I think the disappointing thing for me is that this, you watch city council meetings and you see several council people saying, well, this is a great opportunity for the kids. But the kids aren't footing the bill. Like, why was there not robust discussion and questions and talking about these things that we're talking about? Like, you can't be a cheerleader for everything.
No, you can't.
And it's not to say that the project shouldn't happen, but the level of conversation should have been elevated to the point to talk about these things. And when you watch these meetings, like the last meeting, when the presentation was made and the contract was recommended and accepted, the only person that spoke up was Kristen Alshire. Like, there was no discussion at all. There was no challenge of anything at all. And then again, 84 seconds yesterday, it was rubber stamped.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, and the $500,000 is a very good point, and I've seen that before. And as a person who works for a company that bids on state, local, federal government contracts, I can tell you that change orders are a wonderful thing.
Exactly.
Right. In fact, when I was when I was at Deep Creek one summer, I met a guy who had a boat, and he was a contractor for the federal government. You know what the name of his boat was? Change order.
That's right. That's right.
Because that's how he bought it. So we don't know that.
Well,
again,
do me a favor, Jim.
I don't think
tell people what a
Waynesboro-
change order is.
Change order is, hey, you didn't tell us we needed to do this, and now we need to do it. So here's what it's going to cost.
Oh,
you.
hey, we discovered this.
Right. But here's the other thing. And again, going back to Waynesboro construction, if you look at the other projects, they do not have that history of playing that game. I mean, obviously, if there's something that needs to be changed, yes, they have every right to do that. But I've not seen that in other projects they've done, and they do have a very long and successful history in Washington County.
And sometimes it's not the contract. It could be what was not put in the RFP.
Well, that's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm not knocking the contract at all.
I agree, 100%. All right, take us out. We're done.
We're done?
We're done.
There's so much more.
But wait, there's more.
Well, I believe we're definitely going to revisit this in some way, because they're going to have to let the city residents know how they're going to foot this bill, and also, are they going to be successful in a tighter legislation year getting more money? Are they going to be able to go back to Annapolis and get more money?
Yes. And tell us about the revenue it's going to bring in and benefit other than the warm and fuzzy. Give me some numbers.
Right.
That's all I want to know.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, that's all the time that we have for tonight. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. But most importantly, join us next week for another episode of